Exactly. Well, there's two.
No, I was on the it's already on. In Jerusalem? Can I talk?
Randy, you have a beautiful belly button.
Oh, there you are.
You're in.
Sheldon's going to get us started. And then
If I could get everybody to take their seats, please. I'll give you a moment.
Danielle? Danielle?
yes.
I want to be able to watch what's going on.
Right now it's just my shirt.
But I want to speak. I told Steve I want to speak after.
We go? Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to our meet and greet. We managed to keep the snow from falling tonight. They predicted a little, so we got a little reprieve this evening. I hope you enjoy all the information you're going to receive in the next hour, I hope, an hour and 10 minutes. And I'm Rav Baruch in Jerusalem.
I actually thought that I was going to be speaking after Reb Steve, because that's what I had asked for. But anyway, it's really good to see many of you. I can say that it's been hi there in the back. It's been a interesting time here in Jerusalem. First of all, as you know, there's an election that's been called. There's a lot of campaigning. Some of you have seen my Facebook posts, know that I've been involved in some activities against one of the entry of one of the political parties into the election campaign. It's been a time for us of seeing grandchildren, which has been wonderful. A time when I really could sit down and do some serious writing for a book chapter, as well as to accompany some senators from Canada around in a CIJA mission, and to join the CIJA board, and doing the kind of information gathering and activism that we characterize and we understand that CIJA does. It's also been an interesting time because we've had hospital emergencies, and everyone's well. We've had break-ins and had to deal with the Israeli police and the CSI, but everything, thank God, for us as well. We've also spent a lot of time setting up an arrangement with a contractor and going and shopping for all the things that one does when one sets up an apartment. We are, as you know, hoping that we'll eventually be splitting time between Toronto and Jerusalem. So that's sort of what I've done on my summer vacation, which hasn't been summer, although compared to you, I guess it has been pretty warm here. It is rainy and damp, but it is not white, and you don't freeze in the same way. I just want to say that I'm delighted that Reb Steve is going to be sharing with you his vision of the congregation for the future. As I've said to many of you in the past, my hope is that even though many of my responsibilities will end, that relationships will continue. As I'm looking at faces, I'm seeing years and years of history, common times together, some hopefully, as in the past, very full of simcha and sometimes full of sorrow. But I see you with a lot of love, and I just want to share that with you. I've tried to, as the rabbi, work and create and encourage a dynamic and diverse community with many different interests and needs. My focus has been, as many of you know, on family and adult education, on chesed and mishpat activities, to support people in need and to change things in our society. I've sought to expand cultural and community activities, and to provide spiritual and pastoral needs and care. We really, in the synagogue, as you know, provide support for people from birth to death, actually pre-birth to post-death. We are available for you at all times, and even while I've been here, I've been working with many different individuals and families. Times of health and of illness, periods of anxiety and of celebration, and always seeking a way to move forward, but recognizing that sometimes people are stuck, and our goal is to help them when they're stuck to find ways to move a little bit forward. I was asked how many people I've worked with over the quarter century. I estimate that there have been over 1,500 shivas, maybe more, at least 1,200 births, both boys with britot and girls with baby namings. And there have been times of neonate work, as well as watching these kids grow up to B'nai Mitzvah. We've had, while I've been the rabbi, probably over 2,400 B'nai Mitzvah, and probably over 1,200 weddings. So there's a lot of people contact that I've had. And while I cannot remember everybody at every point, when people come up to me and say, Rabbi, do you remember me? You did my wedding 23 years ago. That's still, but they haven't been to shul since then. But I've tried very much to develop among all of the Klei Kodesh and our spiritual team an awareness that it's relationships that mean the most to people. And while we have to do all of the things in terms of tefillah and in terms of the way we run our services, to make them meaningful, to make them spiritually deep, the reality is that people always respond to us as people, as individuals. And so we've spent a lot of time always asking ourselves, in the midst of a large congregation, how do we create spiritual niches that will embrace people? I think that what we're calling the Center for Spiritual Wellness will help us to continue that legacy, to provide a clear focus and direction, to continue what I think is a long shift from what I'll call membership maintenance to mitzvah motivation that comes out of relationships. Our goal should be always a combination, seeing both Jewish growth and personal growth intertwined, so that ultimately we can make a whole person and support a whole community. I'm going to be listening in for the rest of the meeting, and I thank you even for listening to me for just a few moments. I hope you have a good evening. I've just awakened after 4 hours or so, and I'm starting my day now. So I'm turning it back to Sheldon or to Reb Steve.
Thanks, Rabbi. What time is it there for you? 3 o'clock in the morning now?
2:45.
2:45. So that's dedication. Can you turn it down a little bit?
Wait, I couldn't.
God, I feel like I'm being watched. Big Brother's watching me. First of all, I want to start by thanking Rav Baruch, thanking all of my colleagues at Beth Tzedec. No, he wants to hang out, but I would actually like to take it off the screen.
So
no, it's fine. You can leave it.
no, Rav Baruch, go to the
I
YouTube.
don't see you, Steve. Reb Steve, I don't see you at all.
Go to the live stream on YouTube. And
Go to the no, I can see everybody else.
Yeah, but if you go to the live stream, you'll be able to see me. That's the best technology for that, right? Yeah. So, we had this program before on Purim, right? The Suda, rabbis telling jokes, and I think rabbis telling jokes starts with rabbis using technology. What I want to say again is, first of all, I don't want to be limited behind here, so the guy in the camera is going to have to follow me. I have a microphone. That's a good thing, right? But I want to begin by saying thank you. My colleagues here at Beth Tzedec, the lay leadership, all of you. I've been here for a month, and I've met so many people. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But everybody that I've met has been so warm and welcoming and accommodating, and it's really been terrific. So thank you for that. A special thank you to Rav Baruch, who is, as we all know, is a mensch among menschen. And whenever I ask people about, tell me what you've loved about him, the first thing that comes to people's minds is what a great caregiver he is. What a great pastor. Of course, I know him as a colleague as also being an excellent teacher and a preacher and a friend. He'll never tell you this, but among our colleagues, Rav Baruch is known for really taking a special interest, especially in the younger colleagues, and getting to know them and making himself available to other rabbis as a mentor and as a coach. And though he told the joke about the wedding he did, and you remember me from 23 years earlier, I bet, and I bet you all know that he probably does remember them. And he does remember their name, and he does remember what he said to them and what happened underneath the chuppah and so forth and so on. So Rav Baruch, a special todah rabbah to you. It's really great for me to be here as your partner as we do this great transition for Beth Tzedec. And I'm just blown away that you're like awake and are going to stay awake for this. Thank you for that dedication to Beth Tzedec and the support that you've personally shown me. So part of the new vision is an exercise that we're going to do this evening. And for those of you that are on the live stream, you can use the chat function to do this and talk amongst other people that are on the live stream. We have Daniel Silverman, who's going to be monitoring that. He's going to be sharing with me some of the comments that people that are logging in from, I would guess, most from Florida, some from Mexico, Rav Baruch, certainly from Israel. Maybe there's others, and who knows what other stalkers we might have out there that are logging in, but they're welcome to participate as well. Part of the new vision is the way in which we talk to each other. And it's not really my vision that we're going to be talking about. It's really our vision that we're going to be talking about, and the way in which that vision gets expressed and gets realized in the activity that we do together as a community. So on every table, there's a card that has 3 questions on it. what I'd like you to do is take 5 minutes. This is about what's top of mind. If you're writing a thesis, it's not going to be helpful. It's fine, Alan. It's fine. You can fill it out too. And at the end of the evening, if you're so inspired that you would like to get involved, just write your name on it. But we do want to collect this because this is part of the data of how we're going to build our vision and make it all happen together. So there's three questions here. The first question, and I'll say them for those that are on the live stream so you can answer to them. The first question is, describe a meaningful moment you've had as a member of Beth Tzedec. Describe a meaningful moment that you've had being part of this community. The second question is, how do you think we could build upon that moment and create more great experiences for others that are similar to those experiences? And the third is, if you could create one new program or practice inside or outside the walls of the synagogue, what would it be? Okay? So for those in the room, those are the questions. Danielle, maybe you type them on the live chat, so they have them on the live chat as well. 5 minutes, fill them out. Okay, so Alan, even if you're not a member here, you come here a lot.
Come here a lot.
Yeah, so here's what I want to know. What do you find meaningful about being here?
Going to different lectures.
So that's what you should put down. Okay? And for this last one, you gave me something on Facebook. You said I should do a Shabbat Mincha.
So let's study good part of Memcha.
So that's what you should write down.
Okay.
Okay?
Would you mind moving back a bit?
Sure. Okay, we're going to do what's called a jigsaw for those that might be educators. What I'd like you to do now is turn to the people at your table, and maybe 2 or 3 can share what they wrote for the meaningful moments, right? Just for the meaningful moments. 2 or 3 people at the table, turn around and share what you wrote, and same for the people on the live stream. Share that meaningful moment with somebody else, right? We're going to take another 5 minutes for that. So there should be talking now. Yeah, let me put that. So
Yeah. Do more HESED projects. Yeah. For young professionals for 2030.
that's it. Yeah. I'll repeat it. Otherwise, it'll take too long. Yeah, if you want, put your name. Has every table been able to hear from 2 or 3 people? All right, let's try this again. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap once. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap once. Has every table been able to hear from 2 or 3 people? Raise your hands, yes? Okay. So do we have a couple brave people to be nachshonim, right? The first to walk into the water so that it can part, for the Israelites to pass through. A couple of people want to share with the whole group. I'll repeat or paraphrase what was said so the people on the live stream can hear it. Dot. So Dot shared that she was here in the mezzanine service for the High Holy Days, and what she experienced from the tefillah, the prayer that was created, was an opening to feel connected to God. Great. Somebody else. Get a couple more out there. Debbie, I saw you raise your hand. So Debbie shared that she was coming into the office to do some administrative work for the congregation, and Rav Adam Cutler came running down because the minyan needed one more person, and that was for Debbie the first time that she counted in the minyan to make the quorum of 10. Great. Couple more. Let's get 2 more. Brave Nachshonim. Go ahead, Alan. So Alan really cares about the study opportunities and the lectures here at Beth Tzedec, and his suggestion for how we can expand that is to start a Shabbat afternoon study session prior to Mincha. Got it. You can give it to me. We'll take it. One last person. Yes. Remind me of your name. Marilyn, thank you. So Marilyn became a bat mitzvah as an adult in life, a very spunky, mature adult. And that was a meaningful moment. So there's about 100 people in here this evening, maybe a little bit more. I've been here for a month, and I think I've met probably about 350 people already, whether it was during Shabbat services or parlor meetings or one-on-ones or where's Mr., right? Ron and, right? And people who came a little early for this evening. We sat down, we got to know each other a little bit. I've met probably 300 plus people already, and there's another 100 people here. And I can tell you to a one, when I ask this question, everybody's answer has to do with relationship. Nobody talks about the synagogue in terms of membership. Nobody talks about the synagogue in terms of a building. Nobody really remembers a bar mitzvah party or a wedding suda or something like that. I mean, if they're remembering the simcha, they're remembering what it felt like to have their children on the bima reading Torah or under the chuppah. Everybody talks about relationship. Our meaningful moments at Beth Tzedec have to do with each other. And that's it. They have to do with each other. And I can tell you, in my previous role, when I was the CEO of United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, and I would travel North America and meet with synagogue leaders, lay and professional, and have these same kinds of conversations, it's always the same. People talk about relationships. They talk about how somebody else in the community that they're a part of, in some way, shape, or form, impacted their lives. And so what I want to talk to you about tonight is very much building on what Rav Baruch has focused on and accomplished at Beth Tzedec, but taking it to the next level, because I think we're living in a moment of, it's a threshold moment, historically, not only for the Jewish people, but I think for all of civilization, human civilization. The world is changing rapidly before our very eyes. It's accelerating. It's disrupting everything that is familiar and normal to us. And we already know that the future is going to be very different than where we are now in the past. And the question really is, how can Judaism, as an ancient wisdom and practice, add value and meaning to human beings as we're living in this moment of transition and change? Right? We all ask the question, how do we make it relevant? What relevancy is ultimately about is how do we understand what's going on in the world, and how do we build the type of community that provides the skills to respond to it? And for me, that answer is summed up in one Hebrew word, shleimut. Shleimut, which comes from the Shoresh Shin Lamed Mem. It's related to a word we all know, shalom, right? How can shalom mean hello, goodbye, and peace? The answer is because it really means something else. Shalom, shleimut, is about wholeness. It's a shift from why we create communities, from an identity that was built on boundaries. Very often those boundaries were external, right? This is the lachrymose view of Jewish history. They tried to kill us, they failed, let's eat. Right? There's an external pressure of what Jews couldn't and could not do, of anti-Semitism, that forced Jews to be a group within a certain boundary. And the immigrant experience to North America for the first couple of years supported that. Right? You know, there were, the reason we have Mount Sinai Hospital is because there was a time, even in Toronto, when Jewish doctors couldn't work in Toronto General. I don't know if that was really the hospital then, but you get the point, right? And so we formed a Jewish hospital, or we formed JCCs because the country club wouldn't take us, right? We're now living in a world where those boundaries no longer exist. The external boundaries take a totally different form in terms of anti-Zionism, where Israel has become the international Jew, right? And that's a whole conversation for another point in time. And even though we see anti-Semitism on the rise again in Europe, and even here in North America and in Canada and so forth, it is still not yet anywhere near what it was in the last century, right? And most young people today, they're not thinking about anti-Semitism in terms of their Jewish identity. So the question of relevancy that they're asking is, how can Jewish wisdom and practice add value to my life and increase my experience as a human being and inspire me to do something to make the world a better place for myself, for my friends, for my family, for my community? That's the question. And we have to think about, how do we build a community that responds to that and helps people find shlemut, wholeness, a Jewish mindfulness that ultimately leads to Jewish resiliency. Right? So what's going on in our time? Just a couple words on this. And then I want to skip to what we do about it. But these are the things, I mean, I'm not telling you anything you all don't know or you're not experiencing, you're not witnessing your children or your grandchildren, right? There's three major forces impacting our world today. Tom Friedman, in his book, Thank You for Being Late, gives the best analysis that I've ever seen about this. But they're essentially climate change, globalization, the global marketplace, and the acceleration of technology are converging and accelerating in such a way that they're changing every aspect of the human condition. If you want to see it, you have to see the research of what's going on with teenagers and college students. Because what's going on with teenagers and college students is going to be the reality of their adult experience in the next decade or 2 decades at the latest. There's a recent article in The Atlantic. It's an adaptation from Jean M. Twenge's forthcoming book, iGen, Why Today's Super-Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less Rebellious, More Tolerant, Less Happy, and Totally Unprepared for Adulthood. And in the article, she points out really the connection between screen time and smartphones and the overall well-being and health of teenagers. And one of the things she says very early is that the impact of these devices has not been fully appreciated and goes far beyond the usual concerns about curtailed attention spans. The arrival of the smartphone has radically changed every aspect of teenagers' lives, from the nature of their social interactions to their mental health. These changes have affected young people in every corner of the nation, really every corner of the world, and every type of household. The trends appear among teens that are poor and rich, of every ethnic background in cities, suburbs, and small towns. Where there are cell towers, she writes, there are teens living their lives on smartphones. And so you tell me, what are some of the characteristics of this? How they watch TV, right? How they hang out. The issues of acceptance are now exasperated because they measure their well-being by how many likes they get on Instagram or SmartChat or Snapchat, and so forth. She goes on in this study that psychologically, teens today are more vulnerable than millennials were when you look at millennials when they were teenagers. The rates of teen depression and suicide have skyrocketed since 2011. Teen depression has gone up 42% since 2011. And it's not an exaggeration to describe iGen, this generation, as being on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades. And much of this can be traced to their phones, right? And what's true for teens is true for adults as well. There was a recent study from the Ontario Commission of Health that showed that 1 out of every 10 adult in Ontario experiences anxiety or depression at least once a year, and that 34% experience it at least once in their lifetime, and that those numbers are up really threefold since a decade ago. And the part of her study that really jumped out at me was that there's not a single exception to the data. When you look at all the data, not just the one that she did, but all the data that's been collected in the last decade, all screen activities are linked to less happiness, and non-screen activities are linked to more happiness. The opposite is true when you measure in-person interactions. We are living at a time of the greatest anxiety that has been measured in human history. These are the things that we all talk about and that we pull our hair out about at the dinner table, right? You know, we look at the nature of politics. We look at the nature of how it's so hard to have rational conversations with other people today. We're concerned about the economy and the future of job growth and wages. We're concerned as Jews, we're concerned about Israel and what's happening in Israel, both in terms of an increasing right-wing orthodoxy. Like even today, for example, the deputy mayor of Jerusalem refused to go to a program because it was being hosted at United Synagogue's center on Agron Street. Right? He won't even walk in the door, and the program had nothing to do with the conservative movement, but because the location had to do with the conservative movement, he wouldn't go there. Right? I mean, this is like, if I wasn't living through it, I wouldn't believe it. And we see what's happening with our kids and our grandkids, and the way in which most of the people in this room have expressed it to me is what I'm concerned about, what I'm anxious about is whether or not my grandkids and my kids are going to be Jewish. And sometimes I think we confuse their involvement with synagogue life with their Jewish identities. Because just because they're not involved in the synagogue doesn't mean they don't have passions and concerns and involvement with Judaism. Although there is a reason to be concerned about that, because the synagogue has been the most successful institution for the mass transmission of Jewish identity from one generation to the next for the last 2,000 years. And we're living at a moment of change in which we don't know if we can say that anymore. And so what we need to do is we need to think about what is relevant not only to us, but to the next generation, and what are we prepared to do to respond to it in order to help improve the human condition, which in some ways is not a new vision of Judaism at all. It's not a new vision at all. I put on your tables a section of the Amidah, of the private prayer that we do on Saturday afternoons at the Shabbat Mincha service. The Shabbat cycle of the Amidot, right, the middle sections which change, deal with three broad themes. On Friday night, we say, Vayichulu Hashemayim v'ha'aretz. It's all about creation. We acknowledge God as the creator of the world, and just as God rested on the seventh day, on Shabbat, to set it apart and not to do the work of creation, so too do we rest. We imitate God. On Shabbat morning in the Amidah, we sing V'shamru v'nei Yisrael, Et Shabbat, which ends, by the way, with Shabbat v'yinafash, that Shabbat should be a day of rejuvenation. Right? But V'shamru ultimately is about revelation. So in the morning, we thank God for the gift of revelation, for the gift of Torah, which provides us with a guidebook on how to live a life that matters, how to accomplish shleimut. And then in the afternoon, we say this paragraph, Ata echad v'shimcha echad, which is reminiscent of the vision of Aleinu at the end of days. Right? But look halfway through in the Hebrew where it says, Menuchat ahava undava. Menucha is rest, but it's not the Shabbos shluf that it's talking about here. Although I highly recommend the Shabbos shluf. But menuchat ahava undava, it's a rest of love and of faithfulness. Menuchat emet ve'umunah. Menuchat shalom. It's a rest of shalom, of shlemut. V'shalva, which is shalva is like it's like Jewish mindfulness, meditation, when you're really aware of what's going on. V'hashket, of quiet. V'vetach, and the security that comes from having achieved that bliss of shalom, shalva, and sheket. And then it says, Menucha shlema. It is a complete, wholesome, shlemut rest that God ultimately wants for us. The vision of the Amidah, the whole vision of Shabbat is about shlemut. It's about taking the time to be mindful of what's going on in our lives, in our world, and reflecting on the values that matter most to us, and reconnecting with them. Reconnecting with family during Shabbat meals, reconnecting with community by coming to shul, and reconnecting with God by finding the space, as Dot talked about that she found here on Rosh Hashanah, of a tefillah experience that really opens us up spiritually to connect to something beyond ourselves. And our children, our grandchildren, they crave this. And we take it for granted because our experience has been different. We grew up in a post-Holocaust, Israel not a guaranteed experience. That's not true for our children and grandchildren. And so all of the old structures of anti-Semitism and identity and boundaries, which are familiar to our generation, don't exist in a world in which climate knows no boundaries, the marketplace knows no boundaries, and technology knows no boundaries. We can't be talking about egalitarianism when our children and grandchildren are talking about fluid gender identities. That's a conversation from 30 years ago. Egalitarianism is. Right? What we have to be talking about is how do we create a Judaism that is spiritually accessible? And that Judaism isn't just new wave, crunchy granola, Berkeley Judaism. I argue that it is embedded in the tradition that we profess to want to maintain and move forward. It's right here in the Amidah. It's 2,000 years old at least. And there's tremendous source material from Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, from Tanakh, from the Hebrew Bible that we can point to that feeds into and supports that vision of Judaism. Our challenge is how are we going to create the kinds of community by which it can be renewed in a Jewish context. By the way, getting back to science, there was an article in Maclean's that appeared in 2015, and I picked it up. I was at Rav Baruch's house. I was here at Beth Tzedec in my previous role. And on Shabbat afternoon, I read this article, and I picked it up, and I still have it, and it's still with me. And it says, the science is in, God is the answer. Spirituality, if properly fostered in children's formative years, will pay off in spades in adolescence. Spiritually connected teens are remarkably 60% less likely to suffer from depression than adolescents who are not spiritually oriented. They're 40% less likely to abuse alcohol or other substances, 80% less likely to engage in unprotected sex. Spiritually oriented children raised to not shy away from hard questions or difficult situations also tend to excel academically. The answer is right here in our tradition. We have to stop assuming that it automatically gets transmitted without an intentionality of how do we reinterpret it to make sense for today's generation of Jews. Jewish wisdom and practice, relationships are the answer. And so what my vision is shlemut. And the way in which I want to accomplish it is we have to change our culture. We have to stop sitting in a room thinking, what program can we put together that's going to bring Jews and pews and bring people to the synagogue? The measurement of our success is not how many people come to shul. The measurement of our success is how many meaningful Jewish relationships can we engender that impact people to live lives that respond to the anxiety and the stress of our time and elevate the moments of joy. What I want to be able to do a year from now is be able to sit in a room with every lay leader of the synagogue and with every professional member of the synagogue and go through the membership roster and say that we know at least, that everybody in the membership roster is known to the leadership of the synagogue. And that we know at least one thing about them, one thing about their story that moves them. And then what I want to be able to do from a programmatic perspective is be able to take what we know and bring people together in order to facilitate the stuff of what it means to live in the 21st century. Those are the conversations that we need to have. The conversations that we had around the table tonight. What gets me up in the morning? What keeps me up at night? What are the things that I'm passionate about? And how can Jewish wisdom and practice help me fulfill that passion? We need to invest in people. We need to make sure we have the very best leaders, professional and lay, that Toronto can muster to build this kind of community. We need to invest in each other. We need to be going on retreats. We need to be learning. We need to create spiritual moments in the sanctuary and, yes, also the meditative, Berkeley, crunchy granola, yoga, Judaism as well. We need to be doing both. And we need to be doing everything within the context of shleimut. The four questions that we need to ask are, what do we want each other to know, to do, to feel, and how to be connected to each other in the context of Jewish wisdom and practice? Everything we do, from how we design Shabbat services to the high holidays, to our youth engagement, to 20s and 30s, to the game day on Thursdays, to everything. And how do we create a laboratory by which we can also develop new rituals? There's no ritual for retirement in our tradition, but there should be. How do we reclaim the mikvah? And one of the conversations I had with a young woman in the congregation in her early 30s about the Center for Spiritual Well-Being and about this vision for the future. She shared with me in the parking lot, because we know that's where the real conversations take place. Right? You're all going to go into the parking lot. You're going to sit there in the cold for about 10 minutes saying, what do you think of this, Wernick? Right? Those are the real conversations. But she shared with me that she had 2 miscarriages. And she never would have thought in a million years to turn to the synagogue for spiritual help. But that if we had such a center for spiritual well-being, it's something that she might have thought about doing. And then we imagined together that, had I known, right, or had the synagogue known, I would have suggested, let's go to the mikveh. Not for reasons of family purity and everything, which are so Israelite Torah tradition, right? But because the mikveh it's a womb. It's a metaphor for a womb. It's a ritual by which we wash away death and the past, and we renew ourselves for the opportunity of rebirth. And I shared with her a psalm that I think might have been meaningful for her, and that there's other organizations in the world that have really beautiful prayers that can be recited at that moment. Our vision for the future is that when we know of what's going on in each other's lives, we think about how we can turn that moment into a transcendent one, where we can open up our hearts and our being to shleimut. Let me close by saying the following, and then I really want to be in conversation with you for as long as you're willing to do it, and until Randy says we have to leave. The Harvard Divinity School last year released a report called Care of Souls. And it outlined 3 essential elements of the work that I just described. How do we help people find the sacred in the everyday? Not just when they come into the sacred space, but in their lives, in the way in which they live it, at the moments in which they're living it. How do we create shared practices and goals that take us beyond mere identity and belief? And how do we make more accessible an ancient wisdom and practice remixed in our personal spiritual lives, deepened in community? Or to put it another way, as Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks has said, you can have 2,000 friends on Facebook, but that's not a community. Thank you. Sure. Questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, complaints? We're Jews, don't be shy.
If you're willing to come up to the mic, and if you're not able to, we have another mic that we can bring to you. That way anybody and everybody watching online can hear you directly, and it saves Rabbi Wernick from having to repeat it. If you want to stay at your seat, raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you as well.
We'll also every so often pause for questions from the internet. And tell us your name, please.
Osman, I'm just curious what your opinion or your thoughts would be about, you're talking about the study about social media and smartphones for most, like everyone uses it these days, but especially younger people. What would, if it's so detrimental, what would be some solutions? Because it's here and it's taken over.
And it's not going away.
And it's not going away. And
Right.
It's also used in positive ways, but what would you suggest? Or what would be some ideas you would have?
Well, so for one is that it's as if God anticipated the internet by Shabbat, right? Here's 25 hours every week where even if you can't do it for all of Shabbat, imagine what it would be like if you had a cell phone basket as you were sitting around your table and everybody put their cell phone in and it had to be there for a couple of hours. But part of it is like, there's all these movements today about unplugging, right? How important it is to unplug and disconnect from the phone and so forth. So part of that is we have to do that, and we're fortunate. We have a Judaism, we have a religion that actually anticipated that and says once a week you have to unplug for at least some period of time. That's one. Two is we have to do things, right? We have to do things that increase face-to-face communication and relationships. Whether that's social justice, working for out in the cold, or food, or food issues, hunger and food insecurity, which is something that I care a great deal about, or being in shul as part of a community, on Shabbat, or having a minyan in your living room on Friday night, if that's what you want to do. But we have to create more intentional opportunities for human beings to interact with each other, especially for teenagers. And that's why we, for teenagers and for young adults, we really need to focus. If we want to really concentrate on that generation, which I think we do, because everybody says we want to do that, right? That's our anxiety at the time. So part of it is that we parents and grandparents have to change our expectations for what success looks like, because it's not going to be necessarily coming to shul on Shabbos morning. But we also have to invest the resources in people and experiences for them to be together and to have that face-to-face contact, right? It's actually pretty straightforward. But what ritual provides, and this is where practice is important, ritual provides practice, right? People that meditate have a mindfulness practice. People that do yoga have a yoga practice. People who ride bicycles have a bicycle practice. People who are teachers have a learning practice, right? Ritual is about practice, right? And that's also part of the conversation, right? I think halakha is important because halakha for Jews provides the framework by which we practice these things, but the conversation isn't about what halakha says, right? If we start by Jewish law says you have to, these are the ways in which you do it, most young people today are going to tune us out, right? But if we talk about, here's a practice of mindfulness in terms of how we eat, how we connect with the divine, how we create, I call mitzvot habits of holiness. How we make habits of holiness, that's a different conversation. And that's a cultural shift towards shleimut, as opposed to, I want you to be Jewish because I'm concerned that this practice continues. I want you to be Jewish because I'm convinced that Jewish wisdom and practice will make your life better. And I want to show you how to do that. Yes. Nira.
Thank you. I just want to comment that I don't think that the internet and all this is really the etiology or the antecedent for the problem. It's correlated with all this angst, but it's not the beginning of it. I think the beginning is actually what you emphasize as the solutions, which is the lack of community. I think that is the problem.
So if I imply that it was causative, I didn't intend to do that. It's certainly, because when you study teenagers in particular, what's happening is that a lot of the normal anxieties that teenagers go through with the transition from young adulthood to adulthood, they're being exacerbated now because of the internet. And they're being accelerated. But that's part of what makes it a crisis.
Absolutely.
Is the acceleration that's
I agree
happening
with
right
all you said. I'm just saying that it's not
Thank
a
you, Nira.
cause, but it's a
Perfect.
result of something.
Right.
Thank you.
We'll take one more from the floor, and then let's go to the way back. Danielle's my
Making me
Phil
work.
Donahue, which of course dates me very much.
That might have sounded strange for the live stream. I apologize.
And then we'll look at the live stream.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to share what I've been up to. I'm a retired old lady, a senior, and I was depressed when I stopped working, and I thought, what am I going to do now? My kids are grown, and they have kids, they're out of the house. And what I discovered was what I'm doing at the moment. I did this 20 years ago, so I've had some experience. We had an International Human Rights Day, which was very successful in a mall. And what I've discovered, the world is in the sorry state that it's in right now. I want to have it this year, and that's what I'm planning to do. So I've made some connections. I've got some people coming who I've met who are friends now from Muslim organizations, charitable organizations. We're all coming together to celebrate a Human Rights Day. And I feel at this stage in my life, God willing, I'll have many more years yet, but I want to make a difference in this world if I can. At least I'm trying. So that we can have peace one day and show people who we are. And who we are people that want to live in peace with people of all races, all nationalities. We're all God's children, and we're all human beings. And that's what I'm up to now. Hopefully, it'll be successful.
Tell us your name, please.
Pardon?
What is your name, please?
Pearl Silver.
Pearl, so thank you for sharing.
It's my pleasure, and I thank you for listening.
Well, I mean, look, this is part of it, right? Is that we have to create the space for people to share elements of their lives, and as you said, this is you're proving the point, right? That at a moment of great transition in your life,
I also want to repeat some of what we did 20 years ago, which is to have a citizenship court where new citizens are sworn in.
So, and Pearl, I'm sorry, I'd love to hear this at another time.
Okay. Sorry.
But I really want to be conscious of the whole group.
Of course.
The conversation in front of us.
I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from online, Danielle? Yaakov, do we know? And no? Okay. Please tell me who you are. Again,
my name's Elon Kramer. So you mentioned that there are sort of three factors that young people are thinking about or is top of mind right now: climate change, globalization, and technology. And a lot of your talk focused on the intersection of Judaism and technology. What about the intersection of Judaism with these other two trends?
Oh, so, I could go on all night, but Judaism intersects with all of life, right? Rav Shalom is teaching a course on Shemitah and how, Judaism and the concept of Shemitah are a response to being in relationship with the earth. That we have to let the land lie fallow in order for it to continue to have the nutrients to produce what we need, right? So Judaism has a lot to say about all these things. It has a lot to say about our relationship with the earth. We're stewards of that. We learned that from the very beginning of Bereshit. That's what God tells Adam and Eve, right? You got to take care of this garden, right? Don't blow it. It's the only one you get. It has a lot to say about the economy and the distribution of wealth and caring for the vulnerable within our society and those that live on the margins. And with regards to technology, the rabbis understood that in every generation, technology impacts the world in which we live. And they constantly talk about that, even to the point that we might not recognize it, right? We might not recognize the future of Judaism, right? The classic story of this is from the Talmud in Masechet Menachot, when Moses is receiving the Torah, and he notices that on some letters, God's putting crowns. He says, why the crowns? And God says there's going to come a future time where there's a rabbi, Akiva is his name, and he's going to derive meaning from the crowns. So Moses says, I have to see this. So God says, turn around. Turns around. He turns back. Oh, he's in the Beit Midrash of Rabbi Akiva. Doesn't understand a single word that's being said. Not a word. Right? Until finally one of the students says, Rabbi, how do you know this? And Akiva says, Moshe kibel Torah mi-Sinai, because Moses received Torah from Sinai. And now Moses is appeased. Right? What's the story about? That if Moses were alive at the time of Rabbi Akiva, he would not have one clue what is Judaism, the Judaism that he was the lawgiver for. And the rabbis were totally fine with that, because the technology, the social science, the anthropology, the politics, everything changes. And the rabbis knew that, right? And so we have to be courageous enough to recognize how the world is changing and to adapt our religious structures to continue to be relevant. Yes, Yaakov? How am I on time, Randy? I'm okay, good.
I just wanted to share something I learned last night about young people. I was at a lecture at another synagogue, and they were talking about depression. And the psychiatrist from CAMH, Center for Addiction and Mental Health, was saying sometimes we look for really complicated answers, but he said there's been actual studies showing that a really fine way to
body and spirit. And it's not new. Rambam wrote about it 1,000 years ago. We need to reclaim it and re-enliven it for the future. I'm going to stop there. Thank you, everyone, very much. Oh, one thing, please, as you're leaving, take the cards and give them to Sherry and to Clara as you walk out. We do want to keep them, especially if you've indicated you want to be part of working with us to figure out what this means actually as we implement it. Thank you, Alan. Good night, everyone.
I'll see you Thursday night. Come to the concert.